best episode yet. And I get that means nothing because we've only had 3 episodes here at Pat's Interference, but I'm Andrew Callahan for the Boston Herald. And I got to tell you, Ted Johnson, former Patriots linebacker, 1995 to 2005, now working at 98.5 The Sports Hub and NBC Sports Boston, absolutely crushed this. We did a little bit of draft talk at the beginning, kind of a wish list, not a player, position. What do you want to see the Patriots do this upcoming weekend? Then we got into how Ted would have schemed for and prepared for Mac Jones last season if he was on an opposing defense. And finally, I got to tell you the best part, his old Bill Belichick stories about getting drafted in 95, the pick after a punter, and 8 to 10 Miller Lights thrown in there. Plus, the guy is somehow immune to speeding tickets. All that and more with Ted Johnson. Please, if you like what you hear, again, I said this last week, we're only going to get better. So just take 2 seconds, 4 taps, and do me a favor. Rate and review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us elevate our platform. Quick taps, I'd absolutely love it. We'd really appreciate it. And again, you're going to love what Ted has to say here. Here he is, Ted Johnson, former Patriots linebacker, late 90s, early 2000s. You can listen to him on 98.5 The Sports Hub. Watch him on NBC Sports Boston. I know you had, I think it was called The Game Plan, right, with Phil, the TV show you were doing during the season?
It was actually, it was called The Breakdown.
Yep, the breakdown. Okay, yep. Good. Well, this gets into my next point. I would watch that show. I love it, Ted, because I love that kind of X and O insight, the ex-player who keeps up on his homework. But I would always fear for Phil a little bit because you are as very much built 6'2", 250 as you were in your playing days. And you're running through a rip technique with him or something. I go, I should just text him and tell him I love him just in case this is it.
Dude, we had so much fun kind of doing those segments where we get kind of, try and show people kind of what I'm talking about and go through and do an exercise for people. So I'm glad you enjoy that part of the breakdown. We have fun doing it. I get to get my hands on Phil, and I can see sweat beads coming down his forehead every time we get ready to do that segment. Excellent.
We'll see if he bulks up maybe this offseason. We'll see a training camp if he's like everyone else, best shape of his life, just to get through another season of the breakdown.
You better be.
Awesome. All right, so we're running down our Patriots draft wish list. Is 4 items. Doesn't have to be a player, doesn't have to be a position that just if we're running the Patriots, would want to accomplish most. I say let's start at 4. We'll go to 1, and if we have some overlap, which I probably anticipate that we will, we'll just jump on it right away. So your number 4 item on your wish list for the Patriots as we go into this draft starting Thursday night at 8.
Well, I would say number 4 has to be probably. I think an inside linebacker. That's kind of what I want. And when I say inside linebacker, I'm thinking of a 3-down linebacker, Andrew. So I'm thinking of a guy that doesn't come off the field. The Patriots over the years, as you've seen, and the trend is now that, when I got drafted in 1995, Bill Parcells, who's obviously we all know has had a huge influence on Bill Belichick, was a big 3-4 guy, a 3-4 base. So it's 2 linebackers on the inside, 2 on the outside. That's kind of the primary base defense for a Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells type defenses that I kind of grew up in. They're going more away from that, more to 1 middle linebacker with a lot of nickel and dime kind of packages. And so this I think this defense historically has always needed middle linebackers that are kind of, guys that just don't come out. So 1 guy, just give me 1 inside linebacker, Andrew, that doesn't come off the field, a la Dante Hightower, Gerard Mayo, guys that came, me and Brewski that came before that. To me, you need a middle linebacker. If you could get a middle linebacker in this draft, that would be huge.
I like it. I'll tell you, not on my list, which I hear all the points that you're saying. And I think, look, if they went linebacker, say Nakobe Dean falls to 21, right? I think it's a good, safe pick. I think I've just come from the standpoint of looking at so many of those players. We go, hey, he's really good. He's instinctual. He's physical, but he's 230. It's like it doesn't fit their prototype. So I've kind of gotten that out of my mind. I also look at this, as you mentioned, the nickel. They're playing with box safeties and have pretty much since 2017, right? And that's their way to adapt of saying, we'll keep the same personnel on the field and change up our looks with having to, shift guys in and out and provide another tell. It's the same group of guys. We can go from different alignments. So I like the linebacker idea. I just think they're more confident in what they have than we are, right? They look at Cameron Groh, Juwan Bentley's back. Who am I missing? Mac Wilson coming over.
McMillan, who knows? He's
right, because they're only playing 5 to 10% of base nowadays. But look, if I had a 4B on this list, that would have made mine. My number 4 was a developmental O lineman. I know you talked about this last Sunday, on the show. I've talked about it with Alex Barth in the past. Just the idea of they're going to need a tackle at some point. Right? Like Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn are not staying healthy the whole season.
Right. Yeah. No. You're absolutely right. And so if you were going to ask me what my number 3 need is, I probably would say lineman. And to me, the old line clearly with Shaq Mason being traded and Teddy Karras being shipped away is Teddy Karras going to Cincinnati to sign as a free agent. Those are 2 big losses right there. And to me, everybody wants to, and I get this, Andrew. Like you want to give Mac Jones a ton of weapons, right? So you want to give everybody. You look at the arms race going on in the AFC. We want to bolster up our receiving core. Okay, they did that to some degree with Devontae Parker. Look, I'm not as worried about our receiving core maybe as some people are. So I feel like the Devontae Parker trade kind of settled things down there. However, one way that you can kind of look at maybe helping Mac Jones is by getting him better protection and getting him, protecting him from the inside out. And so I kind of harken back to, say, 2014 when, the Patriots were 0-2 and it was on to Cincinnati and Tom Brady wasn't playing good and everybody wanted to know what the problem was. Problem was that Tom Brady was getting hit all the time. And this whole thing on offense works only when you can protect the quarterback. Okay. That's the number one thing. And so we talk about, receivers and tight ends and running backs and all the weapons. It really starts with the offensive line. So I am a little bit worried right now, Andrew, about the offensive line, interior offensive line. And so to me, for the number 3 need is got to be interior offensive line. I wouldn't be that upset if with that 21st pick they went guard in this draft. I know that doesn't excite people, but I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, and then you've got 2 good candidates, right? Right up the road, Zion Johnson coming out of Boston College, regarded as one of the safest prospects in the whole class, and Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M, who fits the profile of a Patriots O-lineman because he started at 4 different positions down there in College Station. So, you can kind of take your pick, between the 2, or you can wait till the later rounds where they typically nab a guy like you talked about, Shaq Mason. Even Joe Tooney was kind of a middle round guy that they developed really well. But they don't have a whole lot of time to develop there, where if, I'm speaking more to the offensive tackle side, but you could go guard because you have a starting spot that's wide open. Like you need to plug that. And I think this also speaks to, it's a good point by you in terms of helping Mac Jones. It's not just about, we hear it from Bill all the time, collecting talent. You're building a roster and that roster needs to fit. So Mac Jones is someone who is going to suffer first and foremost from interior pressure, just as Brady did. They're kind of pocket bound, ground bound statue passers. And so you need to have that fortified first and foremost. So it wasn't a need down the stretch last year, but he played worse anyway. And I think if you're going to have a repeat of that, it'll be because of leaky protection. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's you look at the offensive line. Last year, the offensive line didn't do too bad, Andrew. They were 8th in rushing throughout the season. They were 3rd in sacks allowed, which was a little bit surprising. And when we get into Mac Jones a little bit later, I'm going to talk kind of emphasize, the hitting of the quarterback, if you will, as being such a key part of kind of Mac's success is just keeping him protected. But at the end of the day, the way the season started out last year, it felt like Mac Jones getting hit all the time. But at the end of the day, to only being 3rd ranked in sacks allowed last year was pretty good. They ranked 11th in teams pass block win rate last year. So the point is, the offensive line last year was one of their strengths, and now you have 2 guys that are leaving. One in free agency, one via trade. So that's a huge concern for obvious reasons.
Teddy stats. I love it. The ESPN pass block win rate. I was just going to jump in. You got Football Outsiders adjusted sack rate, Pro Football Focus. They're top 12 and all that. You're absolutely right. But of course, you mentioned 2 starters out the window. That's not a stat you can carry over to next season, especially the way things are ramped up in the AFC. Speaking of helping Mac Jones, number 3 on my list was just a slot wide receiver. This kid could start right away. He could be another developmental player. People have started to zero in. I think we get the groupthink right. It's mid to late April. We're all talking about the same kids. Kyle Phillips, UCLA, stood out from the moment he entered the draft process. Really quick, sub 7.3 cone. Like guys who can just get open, who are sudden, I think. And when I remember watching training camp last year, you had that word sudden in mind. And there were only 2 guys in that receiving core that stood out. It was Nelson Aguilar, of course, didn't work out, at least season 1, and Gunnar Olszewski, who's not here anymore. But Gunnar was their punt returner. You need someone in the slot, 3rd and 6, here comes a cover 0 blitz. You got to get the ball out. And I think that's a guy, Kyle Phillips, or anyone else in that slot that can win over the middle of the field.
Dude, look, I'm a huge fan of the slot game. Go back to 1995. The slot game was just starting to get in vogue. And I always want, who's the kind of one of the first slot receivers that were the quarterback, just like you're describing, like we've seen for years here with Edelman and Wes Welker, who was that guy? Think about, if you can think about back in 1995, a division opponent who had a great slot from, where did he go to school? Hofstra University. His name was Wayne Corbett. And Wayne Corbett was, to me, one of the best kind of the Jets used him in slot receiver, it kind of to a degree in which I think a lot of teams started seeing how impactful that type of player like a Wayne Corbett can be. And now you've seen it just get better and better over the years. So I'm a huge fan of the slot game. They need that element in their offense. Look, everybody kind of dogs on Jacoby Myers because maybe he doesn't look physically like the guy that fits that mold. I love Jacoby Myers on his team. I don't care. Whatever it takes to get him, keep him on this team, I think you have to do. I don't think he's that bad in slot, but I hear what you're saying. Slot receiver, a more traditional slot kind of type body, size and build is probably very much needed for this team.
Look, I'm with you as far as Jacoby Myers goes, and it has nothing to do with what he does on the field. This is purely selfish. We go to the locker room. He's a rookie. You know how rookies are under Bill. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. No. Anytime we walk in, even after a loss, hey, what's up? How are you? And I'm like, oh, are you talking to someone over my shoulder? Like, he's just a good, down-to-earth guy. He's not going to break any of their media rules, but he'll talk to you. And it's someone that, for me, like,
refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah. And thank God he took off at the back end of that 2019 season, the last time we've been in the locker room, because he was in every single story regardless. So sometimes you have to remind someone, hey, he's inactive for 3 weeks, but listen to what this guy has to say.
That's right.
So, all right, number 2 in your list.
Number 2, it's cornerbacks, and I'll throw some more stats at you. Look, at the end of the day, so here's what we're trying to figure out, right, Andrew? We're trying to figure out what maybe philosophically the Patriots are going to do. Look, you have, the last 2 years, the Patriots had arguably 2 of the top 10 cornerbacks in the NFL walk out the door. One was traded, of course, with Stephon Gilmore 2 years ago to the Carolina Panthers for a 6th-round draft pick. And then, of course, J.C. Jackson walked this year in free agency. Those were 2 excellent cornerbacks. And the Patriots were okay with letting them go. So that's kind of a head scratcher. You kind of wonder, well, what are they thinking? So the thought process is for a lot of us, and I thought maybe this early on, is just that they're going to maybe play more zone. All right. So man-to-man is maybe going to be de-emphasized to some degree. And so with that in mind, maybe the cornerback position isn't as big of a need, but here, let's face it, at the end of the day, you still got to be a very good man-to-man team to survive in this league. And so to me, the cornerback position is number 1 that they need to go out and get. And here's the interesting thing. Will they go get a cornerback high? I don't know. Because I look at cornerbacks, Andrew, kind of like how I'm looking at wide receivers right now. The elite corners is almost as if, they're going to get, if you draft them high, that second contract, more times than not, it's going to be another big deal that the Patriots probably don't want to pay. And so I think a lot of times the Patriots kind of look at receivers and cornerbacks as if, if we can get them in the middle rounds and then develop them, bring them along slowly so that when their second contract is up, they're not going to be demanding the big dollars. I know it sounds crazy, but I think that's how the Patriots think about that position. So that's one thing there. But, clearly they need help at cornerbacks. You saw what the team in the best team in the division, the Buffalo Bills, did to them the last 2 games. I mean, they were flawless. And so, you need to have a cornerback. So I was raised in the Simpsons where Ty Law, I always had a great cornerback in Ty Law my whole career, the number 1 guy who could play on their best receivers week in, week out. That allows you to do so much more on defense. And so I think this team who's got to generate, pass rush, because although Matthew Judon had a good season last year, you saw him kind of, he ran out of gas there at the end of the season. They need more pass rush. And a lot of times they have to manufacture it by blitzing. So if you're going to blitz because you can't get pass rush with just 4 guys, then you better have better man-to-man guys on the back end. And I think ultimately that's what the Patriots want to do. So to me, this is a big need. I know the Patriots have gotten away with having lesser cornerbacks in the past and still done well. But in today's NFL, with the arms races and all the wide receivers that are in the AFC East, I just think this is a huge need for them. So this is my number 2 need in this year's draft.
Yeah, you hit on a lot there. And I'll work backwards from the scheme stuff where you mentioned, I'm with you. And we saw this change, honestly, midseason last year where they pivot to a little bit more zone. They just didn't have, when Jalen Mills is going to stick at outside corner opposite J.C. Jackson for the rest of the season because they trade Stephon Gilmore to Carolina, he's not a man player necessarily. Like Jalen Mills even moved to safety his last year in Philadelphia. He's fine, and they might even have him as number 2 corner for the next couple of years, but they changed schematically, and it worked. Their defense still held up until the end part of last season. Of course, that's tied to the pass rush, which you mentioned. So I think inevitably they want to do a blend. And some people, when you hear zone right, they're like, we don't want to play this soft zone. That'll get carved up. Because what did Brady do for 20 years? He carved up cover 2, cover 3, any variations of those, cover 6. And so the thing is, zone can be more than just spot drop. And you know this, you're matching routes, you're passing guys off, you're reading how they break downfield. And so there's kind of like a matchup zone element like in basketball. And I think that's where they would pivot if they can. It's just tough to see how they're going to run anything, though, without those corners, because you look at the way they've defended, and Belichick specifically, top quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, and Josh Allen have all seen man coverage rates above 70% in all the recent matchups against the Patriots. And they started to mix in some more zone against Josh Allen. It just didn't work. So I'll jump ahead to my number 1, because that was a starting corner. Some guy, day 1, if I'm at that draft board, Trent McDuffie might not be a multi-time Pro Bowler, but this kid out of Washington, I think you plug and play the zone I'm talking about and some of the man stuff, maybe even a little bit inside in the slot.
Yep. Yeah. No. Absolutely. So to me, and you need a bell cow back there, a guy. I'm thinking of like down the road. Who are the future kind of core guys in the secondary positions right now, and they lack that big time. So get guys in that they get them in the hopper and get them kind of accustomed to what the systems are, so that when these other guys leave, that they have their backfilled with new talent that has. Guys that are going to take leadership on his team. So they need a cornerback in this year's draft.
Yeah, and I think you hit on that too. And you look at receivers, you can make the same argument, right? Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers are in the final years of their contracts. Devontae Parker's a free agent 2023, as is Kendrick Bourne. And how many times have we seen the Patriots make a pick and go, what was that? And then you look at the contract structure, whether it's Nate Solder coming in when Matt Light was still here, Isaiah Wynn even still, they acquired Trent Brown. The draft is not for building right now as much as next year and the year after that. Because you're not going to have a lot of rookies, say for last season, come in, especially in New England, and just make an impact right away. They've got to earn that trust.
It's so true. And it's interesting. I mean, it's a great segue, what you just said, Andrew, into what my number 1 kind of need is, or goal is. And I was just thinking about this is, get more draft picks, acquire more draft picks. So so the Patriots right now, and that's what a lot of people think they're going to do with the 21st pick. They're going to trade back. It's weird to say, but I would say this year, more than any other year, I'd have no problem with them trading back. So I want them to accumulate more draft picks for the future because of what you just said, Andrew. I'm a little surprised. So my rookie year, 1995, Ty Law was our first rounder. I was a second rounder. Curtis Martin was our third rounder. Dave Wallaba was a center from Syracuse. He was our 4th round draft pick. The point I want to make is that all 4 of us that were drafted in the first 4 rounds all started as rookies. Like I'm just used to higher draft picks playing right away. I don't know what's going on with Bill. He has a reluctance or a hesitancy to play the rookies early on. And so that feels like that's just kind of like a thing that Bill over the years has kind of said, he doesn't just draft guys and expect them to come in and play. If they can, great, but he doesn't expect that. I mean, so with that mentality in this year's draft, accumulate more draft picks if you can, because everybody's saying that it's really, you can get good value in the 2nd and 3rd round. So why not accumulate more draft picks and try and get, I would say just more players in the 2nd and 3rd rounds if you can by trading back with that first pick.
Yeah, and this is the perfect draft for it, right? Like everyone's talking about the depth is 15 to 60, maybe 20 to 75, and you want to have multiple picks in that area. Though on the point about rookies playing, over the last 5 years, except for last year's draft, I think the answer is why they're not playing is because they haven't been very good. The Patriots had one of the worst draft stretches, 16 to 19. Before that, though, when they were drafting well, it was rare you would see guys start, except for maybe the day 1 or day 2 guys. And I think it was just because they had good rosters. So no knock on the 95 team, but you guys went 6 and 10 that first season, right?
We did.
Now, the next season, you made the Super Bowl. And that speaks to the developmental point is we're not building just for this season. You're looking ahead to next year, where I've talked about this when everyone's freaking out about free agency, and I think fairly so. But the Patriots rank in the top 5 to 7 teams, I think it is right now, in 2023 cap space. Mac Jones is still in that rookie contract. You have more players under contract than most teams in the league next year. They're saving their financial flexibility for next season when I think they want to make a real push. So you're right. Maybe take those draft picks, start them this season. You're not kind of admitting you're not going to compete. But when you just look at the landscape of the league, look, I don't think either of us are picking them to win the division. And I think they're probably fighting for a wild card spot.
I agree. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And so you're right. look, as much as we all want to look at the draft and when they draft and go, okay, boom, plug and play. That isn't the case. And so for whatever reason, it's funny you say they're just not that good. That's the hard part is always trying to figure out, like, they're not that good, or what is Bill thinking when he doesn't play these young guys? And it might just be as simple as they're not as good as maybe we thought. And that's always kind of a surprise to me, because the Patriots have been missing more than they've been hitting on draft picks. I'm just not used to seeing that. And so that, at the end of the day, might be the simplest answer, Andrew. They're just
or it's fit. We don't have to lay this all at Bill's feet, right? Or the kids' feet. They're coming in, they're working hard. It's just we didn't know about X, Y, or Z. Or you got here, and Cyrus Jones. Look, that was a kid in 2016, corner, punt returner, fit the right system, coming from Alabama, and just completely flamed out, like just absolute disaster. And
but aren't you surprised? So exactly. But take a Joanne Williams. I don't know what you thought, but I look at his film and I look at when he was in Vanderbilt. So he's going into his third year or fourth year. Yeah, and so I thought, you know what I thought when they drafted him, Andrew? First day, he'll be on Travis Kelce first year, rookie year, and it just hasn't worked out. It's just, I think it's surprising to me to see just the Patriots in the last 4 or 5 years, and Kraft even kind of alluded to this in his comments from the owners meeting, that they had to spend in free agency last year because they missed on so much draft. I'm just not used to the Patriots missing so much in the draft like they have in the last few years. That's kind of the surprising thing.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the league as a whole, right? The draft is a crapshoot. We can go down to the science. We can all put on our draft expert hats for 2 months and get into the 3 cones and just your explosion and the GPS tracking data and all this different stuff. But the answer is always, all right, we'll see. Once they get in the building, we'll just have to wait till they play football, which could spark a larger discussion. But I'll just go back. My number 2, I was with you at trade back, but since you already hit on that, I'll switch just to defensive tackle. And this touches on, why you had linebacker early and I kept it off my list. I think if they do a better job of protecting those guys in the middle, you'll get better production at Juwan Bentley, who's willing to come down and, pop helmets with a guard who's pulling around and coming in and does a good job of that. But they were weak up the middle last year. And I think, look, Jordan Davis, a kid from Georgia, 6'6", 341. Here I go, putting on my expert hat. He stole my heart in the college football playoff and playing down the stretch. He might go too early. Someone like UConn's Travis Jones I talked about before. A big guy in the middle, 2 gap, control the middle. It'll help everyone else in the back end.
It's so funny, it's interesting because when in the years I was there, the huge emphasis was on the D line, right? I had Ty Warren, I had Ted Washington, Richard Seymour. I had these big studs.
Vince Wilfork later. Yeah.
Vince my last year. And you're like, why have the Patriots kind of gotten away from these stud defensive tackles? And so that's interesting. A lot of people don't have the defensive line in their top 5 needs, and you have them at number 2. But you know what? They've been terrible against the run, Andrew. And so I think Bill has de-emphasized the importance of run defense, but not to the level in which it's at now. It's in the bottom half of run defense. You go, okay, but it's a passing league now. I get it, but it's about getting more possessions. The Patriots defense are on the field too long, not getting their offense opportunities enough because they can't get off the field. Why? Because they can't stop the run. So you know what? In a guy like Jordan Davis, clearly a super freak. You have freaks, and then you have super freaks. Yeah. And that's Jordan Davis. So that would be incredible. A lot of people don't think he'll be there at 21, but boy, that would be very tempting if he's still on the board to pass up a guy like Jordan Davis, like you're mentioning.
Yeah, his football character checks out. His work ethic. There are no skeletons in the closet. Just grab him. Yep. Now that said, I would bet almost anything it doesn't happen. But the next segment we have here lined up, we list all the things we wish would happen for the Patriots. If you had to bet $100, here you go, Ted Johnson, to place at the casino, the Patriots will do X in the draft. Any round, any player, any position. What are they going to do this weekend?
Oh, okay. Well, I have 2, but you know what? Here's my. I got this. You mentioned the guy's name already, and I'm just thinking I can see the Patriots at the end of the day going offensive guard. And you mentioned Zion Johnson from BC. It's everything I've read about this kid or heard about this kid is like the perfect kind of Patriots type of player. And, there's kind of been a history of, I don't know, there's been some really good offensive linemen that come from BC, really, particularly centers and interior linemen. I played with Damian Woody. You got Dan Cope in here. So we've gotten local BC products to play offensive line here at a high level. So My feeling at the end of the day is if they go interior line guard at that 21 position, and everybody's going to be mad. However, I have no problem with it because I just think you need a stud on the interior. And I will say this about the offensive line. I love the offensive line. I think it's the most important unit on a football team as far as setting the kind of tone for your football team. You need nasty guys. And so Zion Johnson fits the bill. And so to me, that's an important position or important position group that a lot of people overlook and don't think it's sexy. But in this case, I think the Patriots probably, I'm going to guess, if I had to put $100 down, that they go offensive line with that 21st pick.
All right. Yeah. Look, I think it's an easy sell after the freak out that is absolutely going to come if it's an offensive lineman in any kind of round one. But look, we're not playing football in April. We're not playing football according to what the fans say or the media, which I'm very aware of. But I think you go, look, he's a plug and play starter. He's going to be here for 4 to 5 years. You don't have to worry about anything off the field. He's a well-rounded guy, played center at the Senior Bowl, shown at the Senior Bowl, which is always a big check in the Patriots box when they come to scouting these guys. You're protecting the most important guy of the franchise when you draft Zion Johnson. Make it about Mac Jones. As far as for me, they're going to take a defensive back day 1 or day 2, which, look, I'm not going out on a huge ledge here. Day 1 and day 2 account for 3 out of the 7 rounds in the draft, but it's just a priority. We talked about it before. You don't have the corners really right now. You don't certainly have the corners next year, the season after that. And Bill has just been loading up, particularly at safety, where Daxton Hill's a guy out of Michigan. Everyone has brought up. He fits and might follow Devin McCourty's kind of path, starting at corner and moving to safety. He's now, though, I'll tell you at this point, where you probably felt the same. Guys get brought up and tied to the Patriots for so long that you're going, okay, well, this can't happen now. It's never until Mac Jones, the most obvious answer.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you before I answer my own question. Your thoughts on just the safety position in general. Do you think it's undervalued with the Patriots, or maybe just a position that's undervalued in the NFL? Or how would you think the Patriots value like a versatile safety in this system?
I think it's their most prized asset on defense. And you look at their spending dating back to 2017, they're in the top 5, the top 10 every single season. And part of that, look, you have a good in-house captain, Devin McCourty. He's going to be expensive the way that the high level he plays. But they see guys like Adrian Phillips, they signed in 2020. They had no cap space. They made room for him. Kyle Duggar gets drafted that same year before Patrick Chung goes, well, I'm going to hang him up. So you would have had 4 safeties that year in 2020, and they keep investing at that spot. And I think part of it is not only just, the safety now, those guys are the ones wearing the green dots. It's not the middle linebackers like in your day calling the plays, because they're setting the front differently from the coverage, and that's all on Devin's plate. So especially where Devin's on the way out, this year or next, I think they want to replace that single high guy, because Duggar's like a 4.5, 4.45, hyper athletic guy, but more in terms of power and explosion, not the sideline to sideline speed. So I think they prize that overall. And I think that's, why I mentioned Dax Hill, because they're going to continue to do that in this draft.
I'll say this. I just agree with everything you just said. I think it's an undervalued position.
Love to hear it.
And as a whole in the NFL, I think the Patriots, to me, so here's the end of the day, we're talking corners. If they went and got just a stud, free safety, strong safety, I'd have no problem, because I think they use safeties in a way that maybe a lot of teams don't. And I think this, strong safeties are becoming kind of the new it position because of all the, clearly all the nickel and dime teams playing. They need to be, honestly, not only bad, good cover guys, they need to be really good tacklers. And so I just think there's such a huge premium on that position, more than we maybe have ever thought about it before.
Yeah, no question about it. And you can look at this just from a value standpoint, right? Like, you're looking at a modern defense. You need a nickel back. You need a strong safety. You need a free safety and someone who can play in the box. You get a guy like Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips. How about all 4? He can get by having 10 snaps of free safety per game. He's going to play in the box primarily. Throw him over the slot when they, split out these kind of tight ends. The F tight ends were a little bit smaller and running out in space. Like, they've got it. And so you save money, you save roster spots by employing these kind of guys, which, Bill has been loading up, and I think we'll continue to do, like I mentioned. All right, Mac Jones, really quickly. You mentioned we were going to talk about this. I'm really interested to see your perspective. And I know you've talked about him before, as I mentioned, 98.5 and NBC Sports Boston. But look, say you're on a defense preparing for him last December. What would your scouting report have been? And then what are you trying to take away where at that point he was playing his best ball?
Yeah, you know what? You know what I would do? I would blitz him early in games. That's what I'd do. I would get him. You saw so there wasn't a lot of flaws in his game. I mean, for a rookie, he was. I mean, I thought he was brilliant for a rookie to kind of absorb everything, all the pressures, and to execute like he did. I thought it was tremendous. However, what you can do is Mac Jones, as competitive and as fiery as he is, you can use that against him. He's an emotional player, Andrew, and you had to see there was several times throughout the season last year where you've seen coaches have to come over, kind of, hey, calm down. You saw Bill Belichick after a game, after a demoralizing loss. I forget which game it was, right? We had to pull Mac Jones into the locker room because
the Saints,
there,
yeah,
kind of having a public
worst game,
right? Having a pity party. And so there's an emotional piece to Mac Jones where if you can get in his head early, I think it really can disrupt. So I would blitz him early. And that's what a lot of teams do. And then you just kind of pull back maybe in the second half because psychologically you've already kind of accomplished what you want. It speeds him up. He's like a cat on a hot tin roof back there. And he starts maybe making decisions that he wouldn't have if he didn't get hit early in the game. And so to me, that's something he's got to work on. It's just not letting those hits early in how the flow of the game is going early affect him later. There's a lot of emotion with him. And if you can kind of get him worked up and off his game, I think that was one kind of way to attack Mac Jones.
I love that answer so much, Ted. A, because it gets into, I think, things you would have heard and did hear when Bill is starting his Wednesday morning meeting in the team. He's breaking down the team, not just from a statistical or a skill standpoint, but psychologically. Where do these coaches come from? What do they want to do? How do they want to win? Because everyone says, look, I want to win on Sundays, but there's a reason certain guys run cover 3 systems or a West Coast offense. And so then you get into, okay, where does that come from? Sometimes it's part of their personality. And if you can get straight to that core, which is going to emanate and control everything about how he handles himself on third down or why he makes a particular check, you've won. That's it. It's over. And so I think that idea of blitzing late or early to compound him late helps you kind of amplify your leverage in those moments where you need to be at your best and kind of have an advantage.
And can I just throw in a real quick kind of honorable mention?
Yeah.
When it comes to attacking Mac, Mac Jones is so his 2 superpowers, if you will, because when you look at him, you go, well, he has no superpowers, right? But no, he does. It's his brain and it's his accuracy. Just like Tom Brady's was to say, that's the thing that's carried him. People go, when did you notice Tom Brady? I'm like, it was a slow. He didn't just jump out. It was kind of the way he would think through the game, and then the accuracy was always on point. And those are his 2 greatest skills. And so the next thing I would say is you got to, the best way to attack him is confuse him. You have to disguise. You have to show different looks. And if you can confuse him, along with the exotic, kind of blitzing early in games, that's what's going to, I think, maybe the best way to attack him is the disguise. He's already so advanced from a mental standpoint that you have to start disguising and showing different looks already at such a young quarterback. You would think, you didn't have to do that, but that's what you have to do to be effective against a Mac Jones.
2 things on that. Mac Jones was one of the most blitz quarterbacks in the NFL last year, well inside the top 10. So that speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Number 2, you mentioned the Saints game. Again, statistically, tape, whatever your measurement, one of his worst games last season, and Bill takes him off the field. I remember talking to some Saints reporters who were close with the staff at the time. And leading up to that game, they were like, yeah, they're very confident they can confuse him. Which, look, that's not a crazy thing to say about a rookie quarterback, right? But this is a rookie quarterback who had just won the starting job in New England, beat out Cam Newton, which say what you will about that, but had been billed even before he got to Foxborough as this smart, cerebral guy who could diagnose defenses. And, of course, what do? Force him into, I think it was 3 interceptions, had one of his worst games. Looking ahead to next season, what do you expect from Mac? A big jump, a little leap? Where does he change his game? What do we see?
Oh, I expect a big jump. And it's true. Your second year, more times than not. I mean, my second year was one of my best years as a pro. So I'm expecting a huge jump. I think he's just going to look. I think he's going to look fitter. I think he's going to look leaner. I think he's going to be. I thought his play action was a pretty good play action last year. I think he's a really good play action quarterback. I think that'll be a little bit more crisp. I think it'll be a little bit more on point. I think you will see a little bit more of a team taking shots down the field. A lot of people question his arm strength. I have no problem with his arm strength, Andrew. At least not yet. He's still young, and I think his ball. I think he throws such an accurate football, and I just don't get the sense that he's going to have a problem underthrowing guys. I think Mac Jones is going to come out guns blazing. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. But unfortunately, I don't equate that into wins and success for the team. So I think Mac Jones can have a big jump, but I don't think it's going to be reflected ultimately in the win and the loss column. And so I'm not as bullish on the Patriots this year for different reasons. I think Buffalo is just so much better than you. And I just think the AFC has gotten so much better. And I even with a big leap from Mac, I'm a little bit concerned about how many games this team can win, and if it's a real playoff team right now. Right now, I don't have them in the playoffs, but we still have a long ways to go. But those are my feelings on what maybe the next year brings.
Yeah, I like how you covered that, because it's interesting. When you look at the big leap, right, those are going to be made on small improvements he makes across the board. There's no suddenly he's chucking the ball 50 yards downfield to now he can throw it through the goalpost, on one knee. But what you'll see is the kind of different battlegrounds. I think the play action one is important because early on in the last season, he had negative splits between his play action and his straight dropbacks, meaning he was actually worse in a straight dropback, which is not true for basically any other quarterback in the league. Play action is a cheat code. It sucks linebackers like you up, opens that space in the middle of the field. Where's Mac Jones most accurate? Right over the middle of the field. He eventually corrected that. I think it probably stems from just playing in a shotgun offense at Alabama. I remember asking him about that. He dismissed it. He's not going to make excuses. But look, you're in a system for 4 years. It's just what you're accustomed to. Change takes time. The second part that you mentioned, I think, is the deep ball. And this is something I've said more about Nelson Aguilar. But when you look at Nelson Aguilar, by far and away, I think we can agree his best deep threat. He was more inaccurate throwing to Nelson Aguilar more than 20 yards downfield than any other receiver on his team. And I think that just comes down to bad luck. But if you can't throw to your deep threat for reasons that were just this close than we saw in the wild card game, this close can sometimes flip the other way. And those are touchdowns, 2 or 3 more, 50 to 60 yard gains. Nelson Aguilar goes from 473 yards to 700. And that looks like a big change for Mac, when in reality it was just, they had a little bit more chemistry. And those are the small battlegrounds where he kind of wins the war against the whole league.
And why do you got to have that element? A lot of people aren't real big on the deep. Take the top off the defense. That guy speed down the field. Is that overrated? Yeah, maybe to some degree. But this is why it's needed in this offense, because this is truly an offense that wants to kill you by death by 1,000 paper cuts. Slowly, methodically, chew up clock, control the game with precision, pinpoint, accurate throws, and just kind of methodically move down the field. However, to do that successfully, you need to always have kind of this threat in the defense's mind that you can go over the top when you need to. If you can take shots down the field, you have somebody that, like an Aguilar, maybe a Devontae Parker, who gives teams pause when it comes to, hey, we're going to crowd the box. Because this team wants to run, and this team wants to dink and dunk down the field. This is what this philosophical, it's kind of, the core philosophy for this offense for years. But the only way that you can work the middle and have a successful running game is if you have the element of a deep passing game, so that it loosens up that defense, and they got to be mindful of that, and so that you can get work done underneath. And so that's why it's a big key element to any offense, but particularly this offense.
Definitely. Oh, we're up the seams, right? When Gronk was here, that's where they threatened 20 yards down the field. It wasn't necessarily outside the number. So you had Brandon Cooks and Chris Hogan would go deep, but those play action deep passes were these kind of crosses or posts or whatever it might be. It was Gronk over the middle, because either way, working from the perimeter or in the seams, you're kind of alleviating pressure on the box to either run the ball or work the middle with the quick, short passing game. All right, 6 quick hitters from me. Then we have 2 mailbag questions for you. As I told you, this is a mix of personal stuff, your playing days, and kind of getting into media. So you mentioned you got drafted in 1995, second round out of Colorado to the Patriots. Lawrence Taylor famously pounded 41 Coors Lights on his draft day. Do you have any flashbulb memory of that day? What was it like?
Of course. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I didn't have 41, but I had 2 Miller Lights from the time that the guy that was drafted right before me was selected to the time that I was selected. I slammed 2 Miller Lights in that 10-minute, 15-minute span. And I'll tell you why in 1 second. But draft day was incredible. Look, I thought I was kind of predicted, Andrew, to go between the middle of the second to the middle of the third, and I went 57th overall, 25th and second. So I went exactly kind of where I was predicted. However, there was an outside chance that perhaps maybe I could go later in the first round. And there was a team at the end of the first round in 1995 that was interested in me. And there was only one head coach at the combine, one head coach that I talked to at the combine. And it was a coach that came, grabbed me. We were in the lobby of the hotel. I didn't have a meeting scheduled with this team or this coach, but he grabbed me. Johnson, can I get you for a couple seconds? And this head coach grabbed me in the lobby, and he took me into the stairwell over in where no one was around. He shut the door, made sure nobody was in there, and he starts grilling me on cover two. And I'm like, oh man, I wasn't expecting this interview, and I'm kind of caught off guard. But I gave this coach all the kind of cover two knowledge I could, and I hopefully I thought maybe I did pretty good. Well, that coach was Bill Belichick, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Bill Belichick took me into the stairwell and grilled me, and I'll never forget that. And they were drafting at the end of the first round. I thought maybe I would go there. They took another guy named Craig Powell, an outside linebacker. But it didn't work. He played 3 games his whole career. 3 games. Point is, when I went to the 57th pick, the 56th pick in the 1995 draft was a punter named Todd Sauerbrunn. So I slammed 2 Coors Lights after Todd Sauerbrunn was selected at 56, and then I was the 57th pick. Bill Parcells called me, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Oh my God, I have so many questions. First of all, phenomenal story. Second of all, when Bill Belichick gets to New England, because that was just a couple years later.
He was 96, so
96, yeah, a year later. Did you ask him about Powell?
I didn't. I should have, right? Because I should have. And in fact, if I run into Bill, I might bring that up. But I should have questioned him about that selection, Craig Powell out of Ohio State, why he didn't go with me. But the point is that at the end of the day, people want to say, Bill and I have these differences, and we do. We don't see maybe things eye to eye. But I know that he valued what I brought and the skill set I brought, even when he was the head coach at Cleveland back in 1995.
Definitely. Look, you don't have a good a career as you did in New England when Bill was defensive coordinator or later the head coach, and obviously the Pete Carroll years in between. If you don't have some value, because as soon as you don't, you're out the door. Wait, how many Miller Lights after you got drafted?
Oh, then I had probably 5 or 6 more. 7 more. Yeah. then I lost count after I was.
Yeah, excellent. All right, that's the way to do draft day. Not 41, which is good because to be clear, Pat's Interference is not condone 41 Coors Lights on any day, let alone draft day. All right, so Super Bowls aside, what was your favorite win as a player? The most gratifying win in New England?
Ooh, that's a great question. Great question. Oh, there's so many, Andrew. There's one that's just kind of jumping out at me right now. And it was, a lot of people aren't going to maybe remember this, but it was, I kind of call it the best halftime speech ever given to me by a head coach game. And it was a non-speech. And what happened was, it was in 1996. It was the last game of the regular season, 1996. We were playing the New York Giants. Okay. And we had just won the division the week before. So we were going into the Meadowlands to play the Giants in the last regular season game, 1996 season, the year we went to the Super Bowl. And we just won the division the week before, but we had not cinched up a first round bye. So there was still a lot to play for in that last regular season game, even though we had already clinched the playoff. We go in to play the Giants, who were not a very good team back in 1996. And we were down 17, 19 points at halftime. And we hadn't scored a point, and we were just getting crushed. So we go in to make our halftime adjustments, and Rack's coach of the defense, we got the offense over there, and then we all come to the middle for the head coach to say his final words before we take the field in the second half. Bill Parcells walks up to the group, Andrew, and he looks at all of us, and he just kind of looks around. And he shakes his head in disgust, turns and walks out. Doesn't say a word to us. We don't give up a point in the second half. We win on the last play of the game, essentially. Troy Brown, big coach, making huge catches on 4th down with no time left. Big coach gets pushed and we win the game with no time left. And we win that game, and we get a first-round bye, and we're going to win the Super Bowl. That was one of the most – I've never been in a locker room in a regular season game that, at the end of the day, didn't have
that much on the line. But the way we came back in the second half and won that game was one of the most satisfying wins I've ever been a part of in a regular season and a non-playoff game.
That's tremendous. The stakes of that game too, right? Like whatever Bill Parcells chooses to do at halftime of that game might get you to the playoffs, or that first round bye, or have you playing the next weekend. And
if we don't get that first round bye, who knows if we get the chance to play in the Super Bowl. So you're exactly right.
Right. Yeah. And if he turns around and it doesn't work, then you're playing next weekend and you might get bounced. So that's
right.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you know what? Wins like that, I think people who aren't obviously in the locker room, you could list off AC championship games or maybe the game you had the most tackles. Like, no, we don't know anything about what you just described. So bringing that is perfect.
And I will an honorable mention the Colts game in 2003 when Peyton Manning, he checked to a run right over me. And Willie McGinnis hits the running back, but it was a front side play. And that, and then, Vrabel takes off his helmet and starts running down the middle of the field. That's an honorable mention. That was one of the best games to be a part of, too.
The regular season game, right? The goal line stop?
Regular season game against the Colts.
Okay, gotcha.
They tried to run it in with the no time left, and we snuffed it out. And then that was a hugely satisfying win in the regular season.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't know if you know this, Ted, but you beat the Colts a lot in the Peyton Manning years. And
I got the record for you. And I've told Peyton this before. I thought I was undefeated against Peyton. I've only lost on the teams I was a part of. Peyton Manning one time, Andrew. One time. And
what's that overall record?
It was in 1998, his rookie year.
Oh.
We lost to the Colts. I'm 7-1 against Peyton on the teams I played against. 7-1. And so that was, and then, then it started going the other way after I retired in 2005. But yeah, I'm very proud to say I have a good record against Peyton Manning.
Yeah, well, now we know why. They should have just had you out there standing in the corner. Peyton's kryptonite, that's fine. But I'll say losing to Peyton in 1998 when he sets the NFL record for most interceptions ever thrown in a season, you might be 7.5. I'll say.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, number 3, toughest tackle in your career, the player that just, look, you're not going to admit this, big, strong Ted Johnson, but I don't want any part of Jerome Bettis or player X going into Sunday.
All right, you ready? I got 2 names for you. Toughest guys to tackle, okay? Number 2, I will say Mike Allstott. Mike Allstott. Okay, so he played fullback and running back. A lot of people don't. He was a very unique player, Mike Allstott. And let me tell you something. So he played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? And so he had this forward lean that was – and it's the guys that run with the forward lean. The guys that stand up straight, Eddie George, tough player, but when you get all that target to hit, it's a lot easier. And Mike Allstott, one of the toughest guys to bring down, unbelievable leg churn, but a softy when it comes to blocking. He don't want to block anybody, but he'll try and run over you. So Mike Allstott, and then number 1, the toughest guy to ever tackle. And this is partly because he had such a dominant offensive line, but still, I don't want to take anything away from Terrell Davis. Terrell Davis, back in the day, he ran with a forward lean. The running backs, Andrew, when you hit them and they can fall for a yard or 2, those are the toughest guys. So there's a big difference between hitting a guy for a 2-yard gain and then having him fall 2 more yards. 2nd and 6 is a lot different than 2nd and 8, and Terrell Davis had us in a lot of 2nd and 6s in my career. That's unfortunate, but so Terrell Davis and Mike Allstott, the 2 toughest guys.
Yeah, Mike Allstott makes a lot of sense. And that forward lean, again, that's something you might not think about sitting here in the press box or on the sidelines at home. But again, that just area to hit him and just the density and the compact, nature of your power has to get in that spot or it's not going to matter. You're bouncing off. Makes a lot of sense. Who had the most forward lean of any guy you faced, maybe in practice or?
Oh, it was definitely Terrell Davis.
Okay.
Terrell, he would run. So you didn't see the numbers, right? As he's running, so Terrell Davis to me was he ran with the forward lean, and again, Mike Allstott, and partly the 2 toughest guys because once you hit them, they would drag you for another yard or 2, and that adds up. That accumulates over the course of a game. And so that's what made them so good.
Awesome. All right. Flip side, player you relished hitting the most in your career.
Okay. Well, I have a fun little thing for you here. One of my favorite players to ever play against was Jerome Bettis. So the bus he was a terror. I haven't totally fact checked it, but I'm almost positive because I think I would know this. All the times we played Pittsburgh, I don't think they ever had 100 yards rushing. The Jerome Bettis has never had 100 yards rushing against the teams I played on. I love playing Jerome because of his competitive nature. He was a fun guy to play against. He always, when we would play against the Steelers, It was highly competitive, but there was like a respect between the two organizations, and there certainly was between me and Jerome. But I love playing Jerome Bettis just because of how fired up he got, how fired up our defenses got. So that was my favorite guy to play against.
Cool. All right, number 5. We got 2 more. You obviously played your entire career in New England. You stayed in New England. You're doing radio. You're doing TV. When was the last time Ted Johnson got pulled over for speeding? And did he get out of the ticket because he's Ted Johnson?
Yes. Okay. So it's so funny. I used to drive really fast. All right. I'm not afraid to admit. I particularly where I would get busted is on the Pike. So the Pike is back in the day, and there's a difference between town cops and stadies, right? And I love all the stadies. All you guys out there, be safe. But I would get more tickets with the stadies than I would with the town cops. However, I would say this, Andrew. I got off on a lot of speeding tickets. So there's a lot of Patriots fans that are out there that are civil servants, and we appreciate their fandom. But the stadies, I would say, not as many Patriot fans and the state troopers, but I've gotten off on a lot of tickets. It's been a while since I got pulled over for speeding, but back in the day, being a Patriot sure helped me out with some of those speeding tickets.
So what percentage? How many times you've been pulled over and you got off versus
I would probably say I've gotten off 60 to 70% of the time.
Wow.
Oh, you know what? You know what? I got one for you.
Yeah.
Last year, I was going to pick up my daughter to go work out at her facility in Norwood early in the morning. So I would go pick her up at 5 in the morning. This was last year, and I had 3 days a week. And you know what I did? I'm at this stoplight. I get off the Pike, and I'm going into Wellesley, and there's a red light, and it's literally no car to the right, no car to the left. And so I'm like, I'm just going to run this red light. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and there's nobody out on the road. I start to run the red light because I'm a little late getting to my daughter. And here comes a cop pulled around the corner. Boop, lights go on, pull me over, comes up, gets my driver's license, goes in the back, comes back. Teddy, my man, you're good. Go ahead, buddy. And that was great. So I appreciate getting off on so many speeding tickets. And I blatantly ran a red light and was able to get off last year. So there you go.
My man. We got to ride more together. I haven't been pulled over in a while, but I just, it's coming. You zone out on the Pike, 95, 93, going to and from Foxborough, Route 1. We're coming home after a night game. It's 3 or 4 in the morning. Why am I obeying that sign, or maybe that red light in your case? Okay. One last question on that. If you took all of the speeding tickets you've gotten, and let's say you got off on 0% and had to pay all of them, was that as much money, more or less than you would have been fined by Bill when he took over for whatever, being late or any of the small things that happen?
By far the speeding tickets.
Okay.
By far. Good. It's not even close. I'll give you one quick story about the fines with Bill. So there was either you would get fined for being late and you would get fined for missing a meeting. Okay. And so I've been late for a team meeting once in my whole life, a morning meeting. So I got to the facility and I knew I was there. And I got to a point which if I go in, I'm going to be late. So you get fined. It's $1,500 for being late, $5,000 for missing a meeting. Okay. Which do you think I took? The $1,500 or the $5,000?
I hope you took the $1,500.
I took the $5,000, Andrew, because there was no way I was going to walk into a team meeting late in the morning and everybody see me come in late. I said, I'll take the $5,000 hit so that I don't have to save the embarrassment of walking in late. And so I'd rather pay the $5,000 fine and avoid the embarrassment of walking in late than I did of just not showing up for the meeting at all. So I missed that morning meeting. I don't know when it was, but it was many, many years ago. And I took the $5,000 hit.
So people always wonder what a tongue lashing would be like from Bill Belichick inside those meetings. And your answer is at least $3,500. The difference split between if you had just walked through that door versus you choosing to say, fuck it. Like I'm staying out of here.
And let me just say, he wouldn't rip you in the team meeting. There would be a long dramatic pause. And that's all you need is that. I just still want to feel that long dramatic pause. Like, you know what it is, Andrew? You don't want to be the guy that's used as a scapegoat for losing that week because you weren't focused and coming into meetings late. And so I would have rather just avoided that whole thing and pay more money in fines and not have to deal with being the scapegoat for why we weren't focused in winning that game that week.
Okay. All right. Now I'm starting to come around, but man, I sure would love to have.
You would have done the same thing I did. Trust me.
Yeah. Gotcha. All right. Last one for my quick hitters. You transitioned, like I mentioned, to TV and radio. What surprised you about being in the media that you couldn't own as a player, but what's something you also got right thinking as a player about our kind of existence on this side?
Okay, the first thing I would say, the thing that I got right was the importance of establishing relationships with people in the media while you're playing. So I thought it was very important. I think I had really good relationships with a lot of people when I played. I tried to connect with the people that covered team. I tried to look at their job through their lenses when I played. And I think some of that goodwill probably benefited me later on. And so to me, relationships, forming relationships, connecting with people in the media while I played was important to me. Because back then there wasn't social media. So if you got a chance to, hey, EEI wants to talk to you after the game, I jumped at the opportunity because it was a way in which I could connect with the fans and the fans could get to know me. Nowadays, players don't care about, they don't care about being on radio. They don't care about being given a good quote in the newspaper. They have their own social platforms that they can project to people how they want to be perceived. And so it was a whole different deal back then. So to me, that was one of the things I think I got right. Getting wrong, I would say, things I didn't expect when I first got in the media was how powerful your words are. And I knew that they were, but as far as I would say, being just the struggle for a former player going into the media is always how critical to be with your old team and players you knew and played with. It's a very tough thing. I wasn't expecting the kind of inner turmoil that I was going to feel going from, because I went right into CBS. I worked the pre and post game show for CBS right when I retired. It was very difficult to be critical of guys that I knew and respected and I was friends with immediately after. You almost need, like they always say, a little bit more distance from the time you retire to the time you go into be an analyst job, because you're going to have to be critical. I think the best guys are the ones that can be, for the most part, unbiased and objective, at least talk about their team, and like I had to. And so that was a challenge for me.
Gotcha. I love it. Pure, honest answer. And I think that's right. I know Bill has said to other expatriates who've gone on, Rodney Harrison, for example, and just said, look, and he said this to Julian Edelman, who I think shared this later. If you have to rip us, do it. That's the job. So I think the gap helps, like you're talking about, because it's not like it's people you've literally been in the trenches with that then you're going to rip from your cozy studio or wherever you might be. We're sitting at home and it just feels different. But I think, if they have the understanding that you do, which not all players do, and I respect that. Look, they've got a limited amount of time. You don't need to think about what my job is like. But if you do, you understand I'm speaking to a larger audience. The thing that matters most to me is the truth. And even if that hurts your feelings in the interim, hopefully long-term, you can understand I delivered and did my job.
Can I elaborate just real quick? I know.
Yeah.
But I would say about this particular thing is, so people want former players to get insight to, hey, talk to this guy, talk to that guy. And so that was a big kind of, you could just feel this kind of pressure or this expectation, like, well, you're the former player, you're going to be able to get all these scoops. What I told my bosses from the very beginning, sorry, if you want that guy, I'm not that guy. There's guys that currently are in the media here that they play both sides. You cannot play both sides. And I am a media member now. I'm not a former football player anymore. And so it's more important for me to be identified as a media member. This is my second career. And so it's important for me to be unbiased and be objective. And so right now, it's not like I'm friends with all these Patriots. I do my job, I'm better at it because I don't know these guys. And if I had, positive feelings or I was friends with these guys, I couldn't be honest. I want to be honest and I want to be taken seriously as a media member. And so you're not going to hear me break a lot of stories because I talk to this guy or talk to that guy, because if all these guys I talk to off the record to give me scoops, I can't be critical and objective about these players on game day if I had these relationships. So to me, I don't want to be friends with all the Patriots guys on the team right now, because I don't think I'm as good at my job when I do that.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult balance. And that speaks to a lot of things in journalism that, again, not even coming up on the player side, which obviously gets a little bit more difficult, but you understand the distance and the respect that's needed to do that. Because some guys, I've talked to either in this locker room or other places or around the league. You go, look, here's my deal. I'm going to shoot you straight. I'm going to shoot everyone else straight as best I can. I'm not going to get it right all the time, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be researched. So if we can talk ball and, like you're talking scoops or news, whatever it is, if you can respect that, that's great. If you don't want to, totally understood. But here's what I got, just being upfront. All right. 2 mailbag questions. We'll get you out of here. Jake Hamilton from Twitter. He wants to know, and this is a little bit broad, are we being overcritical of Belichick? There's a notion he's lost his, quote, fastball, but many of the coaches in the AFC have yet to show they even have a fastball. So I think that's a different discussion now in the offseason, right? You're talking Belichick, the GM. I think he might be meaning more as a coach, referencing the other coaches in the AFC. So what say you from what you've seen from Bill on Sundays the last couple of years?
Yeah, no, I think he's all the criticism has been warranted. Are you kidding me? Bill runs a tight ship. He has a lot of high expectations. He demands a lot. He's paid a lot of money. All right. And so he is not above reproach. He is not above criticism. So it particularly post Tom Brady. So you got Tom Brady years and you have post Tom Brady. Post Tom Brady, you have seen some very, I think, alarming, disappointing trends that have started to, and let's face it, one of the trends started when Tom was here, and that is the last few years, this team gets worse as the season goes on, right? You're starting to see more critical errors in judgment when it comes to the coaching. You're seeing players not being developed at a rate in which they used to develop here. You're seeing special teams issues that you're not used to seeing when Tom was here. There's a lot of things that are being exposed post Tom, and he's making as much money as he's making, and the demands and in which he expects and expectations he's had as a player. So I'm a former player, and I know what he expected from me. And I knew if I wasn't producing at the rate, he would tell me to take a pay cut, or he'd get rid of me. And so when I'm analyzing this team, just from my standpoint, I don't think I'm being too hard on Bill, and I don't think a lot of the people are, because of how he would expect you to do the same thing, the expectations he had. So to me, at the end of the day, Bill probably he deserves all the criticisms he gets because he is lauded, rightfully so much as well. So it goes both ways, and so I don't think we're being too hard on him because he, at the end of the day, chose not to have Brady as his quarterback, and so I'm not going to judge him. I'm going to judge him just as harshly now that Tom is gone as I would if Tom was here.
Yeah. And, it depends on the criticism, right? If you're talking about the on-field product versus the roster building and they're all intertwined and affect one another, there are different levels or degrees to which he deserves that criticism. But I think you're right. Look, there's in Bill you trust if you're a fan, and that's great. But this is a team that went 10-7, before that 7-9 in 2018, 2019, and 2017. The second half of the seasons, they all got worse. And sure, they reached the Super Bowl in 17 and 18. But as you mentioned, Brady was there. And I think it speaks to kind of the larger, people called it brain drain around the organization. Josh McDaniels leaves because Nick Casario's gone. Dave Ziegler leaves. Defensive coordinator Brian Flores, defensive play callers out. Like, there's only so much one man can do. So his decisions and how to replace those people, and almost exclusively with people coming up in his system, that's where I think you start to go, the criticism is warranted, and that might explain some of you talking about the lack of development with the new coaches, or how we roster build, and are we going to start to change our evaluation process, which they did last year. And then you see the new results in the draft.
So a lot of people are going to say, hey, you know what? Hey, cut the guy some slack. He's won 6 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. What does Bill say every single year at the beginning of every single season? He says, last year doesn't mean anything. This is a whole new year. And so I'm going to judge Bill on what I'm seeing right now and in the present. And I'm not going to look at the past. Yeah, he's had a ton of success, clearly. No coach has had more success. But that doesn't mean anything this year. And so I'm going to judge him and on how it's been looking this year. And what you're seeing in recent years has not been good. And so he deserves all the criticism until he can turn it around and show he's as good of a coach without Tom Brady as he was with.
Yeah. And the other thing he says, we'll see, we'll see how this season goes. Because I think, you wash your books and revamp your roster going 2020 to 2021. Okay, you made it to the playoffs. You got a new quarterback. We'll see how he does in year 2 in the rest of your roster with a good AFC. All right, last question. This is well-timed because I just dropped the story this morning. We're recording on a Monday about Matt Groh, speaking about replacing a new GM, 3rd in 3 years, or director of player personnel. What do you know about him? He was a kid who used to visit when Al Groh was on the staff in your first years under Bill Parcells. And so he says, will he stand up to Bill? I'll tell you that Belichick reveres his perspective and appreciates it greatly because of how smart Matt Groh is, how clearly he explains himself, and he has no problem telling him good or bad news.
Okay. And then I'll take it another step forward.
Yeah.
And I will say this. I think Matt Groh, I have no problem with Matt Groh. Everybody wants to talk about how he got his job. I get it. I understand. But I'm going to judge Matt on his father. And I know Al Groh very, very well. I know Matt. I haven't seen Matt or talked to Matt in a long time, but I know his father. And so I'm going to think a lot of Matt is going to be the principles that are in Matt Groh is going to be the same principles that were in his father, Al Groh. Al Groh, Andrew, was my favorite position coach ever. Wow. I love Al Groh. Al Groh is a football coach. He's fair. He's hard, but I think he's a fair coach. He's a phenomenal coach because not only is he going to make me better, but he's also, there's an emotional and human element to his coaching that was the perfect blend. So he cared about his players, but he was tough on us and he demanded a lot. He was so smart and he got the best out of me. I think those traits are going to be in his son, Matt. And so I have a lot. So Bill is going to listen to Matt more than you think because he has so much respect for his dad. And so I like to think some of that's going to be transferred to his son, Matt. And so I know he's very analytical. I know when you hear him talk, it's like, sounds like, a Kyle Bloom maybe talking like he's this analytical robot, but that's where the game is going. And so I have zero problem with Matt Groh and where he's at. And it sounds like if Matt Groh was involved at all in last year's draft class, like Bill Belichick is kind of, made.
He credited him for assembling the whole draft board.
Then Matt Groh's the right guy because last year's draft class was phenomenal. And so I have zero problem with Matt Groh.
Yeah. And I would say just read the story. It sounds like a cheap plug, but that was over 3,000 words. I sat with Al Groh at a Dunkin' Donuts for almost 3 hours to get some background on him. And I came away impressed. And I think, for those of you who don't know, guy who came up under Bill Parcells' late 70s, starting at Air Force, followed him to the Giants, worked with Bill in Cleveland, worked with the other Bill in New England, the Jets, took over there for a year, and then pretty much finished his career in Virginia and Georgia Tech. So a guy who's been around, knows their system, knows the way they think. This isn't to say his son deserves a shot because of that. Matt Groh got in the door probably because of his last name, but over the last 11 years, if anyone got put on the field, your last name doesn't score any points. And so that was the point that a lot of people raised to me, from Dante Scarnecchia to other GMs around the league. That kid put in the time and the effort. And it helps that, he went to Princeton and Virginia Law School. So he's got a good head on his shoulders. Right. All right, Ted, this has been tremendous. Look, I had 5 people on the first episode. This has been my first, my favorite episode since then. We only have 3. Would love to have you back. Look forward to the draft. And we're going to have you back sooner rather than later.
Andrew, I'm a big fan of your work and just you as a person. So I hope we do more of this. And I look forward to getting to know you better. But you need me anytime, you let me know. But I always enjoy talking to you, and I appreciate you coming on the Sunday Football Show with me earlier in the season. It's been a fun season. I have one more show this Sunday. It'll be the last kind of episode of the Sunday Football Show for 2022, where we wrap up all the things that happened in the draft. So big week for both of us. I'm excited. It's going to be a good time starting on Thursday night.
I'm glad you plugged because I forgot to ask anything else you want to throw out there. I need you when I have my next long drive. So I'll give you a call. You can just sit passenger. We'll swap when I get pulled over and we'll get out of there just okay.
As long as we're in Massachusetts, we're fine.
It sounds good, Ted.
All right, buddy.